do you do? And welcome to Haydn Behind the Music Stand. I'm your host, Patty Ryan, and with me is Chava Appiah, who is a third-year cello fellow at the New World Symphony in Miami Beach. And we'll be talking about mindfulness and escapism. Welcome, Chava. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Patty. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Well, we really met at Spoleto. I think it was maybe my final year there, and I don't know if it was your first year there.
Man. It was my second year there, yeah.
Oh, your second year. Okay, so we did 2 years together then.
Were you in the Lock-in Mom?
No, I was in Porgy and Bess.
Yeah, we were there. I don't think we interacted the first year because we were busy.
That's right. Yeah, the orchestras were split and we didn't have a lot of interaction because it was double the amount of musicians even that Spoleto usually hires. But, oh, sorry, Sushi wants to say hi.
Is that a happy meow?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. How old is Sushi?
She's 3 years old. Okay, anyway, but just the number of times that we went out after rehearsals to go and get food, we maybe accidentally ran into each other at, you reminded me earlier, the Gin Joint was a fantastic bar in Charleston. If anyone wants to take a foodie trip anywhere and wants some real good soul food, go to Charleston and just make sure you bring a lot of money because you'll probably spend a lot of money just on all the amazing food there.
It's just such a good food and cultural location. And I actually went to Spoleto 2 more years after we had our second year together. So I kind of became like one of the veterans, people asking me where to go and eat. And I ended up making lists and sending people articles. And everyone's like, you've been everywhere. Wow. And I'm like, yeah. It's delicious.
And everywhere is good. That's the thing. Like there's no like bad restaurant there or anything, you know, so, or bar really.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I wanted to talk about Elva. Can you tell me the story of your adoption story or just how amazing Elva is?
Yes. So I grew up being scared of cats and dogs mostly. I grew up with bunnies. They're very easy and they don't have
bunnies
that much
are
of an
amazing
attitude.
Too.
Yes. So I fell in love with cats my first year of grad school because my roommate adopted a cat and I realized that all I wanted to do was spend time with her and play with her. And my brother and sister-in-law also have a cat and I was cat sitting. And so I decided to adopt one my last year in Boston where I was for grad school. So I did a lot of research about the different shelters and which ones have better practices, no-kill shelters, of course. And I visited this one called Gifford Cat Shelter and they have a wide open space. It basically looks like a garage with like all the cats having free range. And I met Elba and I loved her because all the cats, you know, some of them are not very nice and some of them were fighting and some of them were attacking humans. And she was just in the middle of all the chaos, kind of like sniffing everyone and licking everyone. And everyone's like, go away. But she was like, you know, I'm here to have fun. So I was like, yes, she seems like a great cat. Also, she was a black cat and they were very thankful that I was adopting her because they were like, you know how many creepy people come to adopt black cats, which I didn't realize, but I did adopt her in October.
Wait,
so
creepy
adopting
people?
A black cat. People abuse black cats often because they're associated with magic and superstition. Yeah, so the shelter makes sure that they make you sign a sheet being sure, and they were like, we're so glad you're adopting a black cat. You seem like an okay person.
Oh my God, so, I did not know that. Yeah. People suck sometimes. I'm sorry.
Yeah, most cat people like black cats, but most non-cat people, some of them are a little superstitious. So she's actually from Florida too.
Aww.
Which is kind of part of the fate because like I adopted her in Boston before I even applied to be here. And then I moved to Florida and she's from Delray Beach. She was found after Hurricane Irma.
Oh, that's so sweet. I'm so glad you saved her then.
Yeah, I think anyone would have adopted her, but I'm glad I caught her when I did.
Yeah, totally. And she's 4 years old, you said?
Yeah, I adopted her when she was 1.
So she's still a young kitten. I'm not a kitten.
She is definitely a young kitten. She does sleep at night a little bit more than she used to, but she still often will be attacking shadows at like 3 a.m. and I'll be like, yep, you're not an old cat yet.
Yeah. Anyway, cats are the best. And if you're not allergic, they make such great companions and get a bad rap sometimes.
They have an attitude. They have personality. Every cat is a little different. And that's why if you meet a really mean cat, just give it some time.
Yes, that's great advice.
I chose Elba because she's like a dog. She's like a dog. She sniffs you. She licks you. She wants to hang out, but she's not going to sit on your lap. She's going to play.
Yeah.
So she only sits on your lap if you like
force her. Yeah. The same with Sushi a little bit. And the times that she elects to actually sit on your lap, you're like, oh my God, she loves me.
Yeah, I found Elba only sits on my lap in Boston when my heat wasn't working for like a day in the winter. She sat on my lap. And then in Florida, because we have the AC on all the time, and I like to turn it down to 65 sometimes. If it's under 70, she'll sit on my lap.
I see. Only for the body warmth. No, she loves you too.
They're cats. It's okay. I'll take what I can get from them.
Right. Anyway, are you ready for some Spitfire questions?
Absolutely.
Okay. Mozart or Beethoven?
Beethoven.
Shostakovich or Prokofiev?
Prokofiev.
Netflix or video games?
Netflix.
Basil or cilantro?
Ooh, basil.
Oh, okay. Harry Potter, Star Wars, or Lord of the Rings?
Star Wars.
The old ones or the new ones? Or all of them?
The old ones. I mean, like, it's all worth it, but my brothers are obsessed with Star Wars, so I watched all the old ones growing up, and then they weren't as excited about the new ones, so I wasn't as excited.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I'm the same. I'm an old school OG.
I mean, my real answer to your question is none of the above. Battlestar Galactica.
Oh, all right. I know I should probably put like Star Trek in there or like maybe Firefly. I don't know. Maybe in the next batch of Spitfire, I'll do something like that.
Oh, Firefly.
I know. I love Firefly. Okay. Symphony or chamber music?
Chamber music.
Your face. I wish that could translate to podcast land, but
I know. I wish you could do a video podcast. I'm all about the faces.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
What kind of tea?
I love all tea, but I definitely focus on greens and blacks. I'm very into oolongs lately.
Yes!
No bag tea.
Yeah,
I discovered loose leaf tea, and I'm like, oh, dang.
Yeah, there's no way
I like bring my own tea to like the hotel now.
Dude, we are on the same page about that for sure. I am the same way.
Matcha. Latte or chai. I've been trying to make my own chai concentrate because it's so overpriced when you go to like Starbucks and order a chai latte.
Yes. So. Well, let me know if you ever come up with like
people should put more ground pepper in their chai.
Ooh, good point. But yeah, let me know if you come up with a good recipe. I would love to like try it out too.
I will share it with many people if I get to a good one.
Okay, cool. Favorite practice room?
It was definitely at Oberlin, and it was definitely on the second floor. At Oberlin, they have all the practice rooms have really big windows, and if you go to certain ones, they overlook a little enclosed garden space.
Aww.
And I'd love to have one where you could practice, and you'd have the mirror in front of you, but then you could also see the trees. And at springtime, of course, they all blossomed, and so it was just this huge pink tree, and you're practicing, and there's nothing to do because it's a small town in Ohio. So it's like you're just so focused, and I loved those practice rooms. Aww. They also had these pink chairs that were just so comfortable that I haven't been able to find anywhere else. So I really want to go back and steal one. Oh. I mean, buy one.
Right. Nice save. Okay. Favorite professor shout out?
Well, my undergrad teacher, Kathy Mines at Oberlin. We've just had a very good relationship develop after I left, and it's just been great to exchange emails with her, but also just share pictures and do, little email exchanges. And she's always just been so supportive, but she also isn't afraid to give me her advice sometimes. So I'm still having teaching moments, even though I haven't been her student for 5 years now.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I'm glad we're keeping close. Also, my grad school teacher, Natasha Brovsky, just being able to see her play when I was at NEC, but also just like in general, if she has a concert, whenever she has a concert, I'm like, oh my gosh, and I have to watch her play. And it's just so motivating to see her play, especially chamber music. I feel like my grad school experience was all about finding specific sounds and intention within the sound. And yeah, she would always ask me, what is your intention, or what can you do to make this most efficient? And I hear myself always saying that when I'm teaching now too, and it's just like, it's stuck with me.
I can't. Yeah, it's trapped inside my brain.
Natasha, you're great.
No, I mean, yeah. Okay. Most inspired musical hero of any genre?
So I'd have to say Chris Thiele.
Yeah,
because
he's great.
I've had this lifelong journey starting in Interlaken with the World Youth Symphony Orchestra. We played his mandolin concerto with him.
He composed a mandolin
did
concerto? Oh.
Yes. I don't know how many times he performed it after that. It might have been the premiere because he sent us a really sketchy like MIDI file to practice with. I mean, the mandolin concerto was cool, but even more cool was the encore he gave after the concert when he just started singing and just like whipping out the Americana. And ever since then, which was like 2008, I just have kind of been his super fan. And then the Punch Brothers came to Oberlin and kind of became an unofficial guest artist for a few years. years. So I saw them so often, and it was just so cool to see them walk around campus because, oh, Berlin's a tiny town and there's only one bar in town and there's only one coffee shop. So you'd see the Punch Brothers everywhere. And like, you know, I'd be going to practice and there'd be Chris Thiele, and I would just pretend to act cool, but like,
right.
You're awesome. Even during COVID, they've done concerts. I know he's been doing stuff talking about creativity and lyric writing on like Instagram lately. So I just love that he's a mind that's always flowing with more. It's never just like he's done.
Right.
You know? I just really love that. And it began my newfound interest in like Americana and folk music, which I wasn't really into at all before 2008.
Yeah. Chris Thiele and the Punch Brothers are just, if anyone hasn't listened to them, you will thank me later. Go check them out on Spotify right now. I love the song Julep, among other songs. I don't know what your favorite album is, but all of them are great. So again, you'll thank me later if you haven't listened to them yet.
My favorite song is Alex from the album Anti-Folkmatic. Alex is just very slow and calming, and they make the mandolin sound like a balalaika. There's just a point near the end of the song where they start just strumming really, really fast. I don't know how else to describe it. You'll have to listen.
Okay.
It's a moment where it doesn't sound like a mandolin or a banjo. I'm not really sure, but there's just a lot of frantic strumming after the chorus, and it's just like something about it. I also listened to that album. I bought that album when I got my wisdom teeth out, and all week I watched Veronica Mars and listened to that album, but I was in pain. So it was like my source of joy. I'm sure you can relate.
Yeah, I had the worst wisdom
sitting
teeth.
at home staring.
Yeah. Okay, so Punch Brothers were great.
But yes, Punch Brother gets you through surgery.
Yes. All right. Most transformative performance experience?
I would say playing Farnace at Spoleto. It's a Baroque opera, and our conductor was just so enthusiastic, but also hilarious, and so much focus and intense work, but also it was a small orchestra, so everything was so carefully done. I don't know, the music was just so fulfilling, and the orchestra was so well put together, and it was just so enjoyable to play that music. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah.
That's one memorable performance.
Okay. And that's the thing too. We always talk about Spoleto as being a really great festival to have fun and meet a lot of people and, you know, enjoy some really great food and cocktails. But at the same time, there are some really incredible musical experiences that we get to be a part of, and some premieres as well, things like that. And I thanked John Kennedy.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, I mean, he basically runs the festival, and he's done such an amazing job at creating that kind of cultural hub in the heart of Charleston. So yeah, thanks, John.
Absolutely. And yeah, Farnace was actually the US premiere, I think. So there was that feeling of like, no one in our country's heard this before, but Spoleto was also my first real opera experience. Like my first year, it was the first opera I'd played, and that wasn't in school. Just getting to work with, I mean, student performers are great, but working with performers who have done these operas before.
Yes. Really excellent singers.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Every year. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot of celebrity singing crushes, talent crushes from Spoleto. Anthony Roth Costanzo. He's a countertenor, and it was just amazing to work with him for the first time, and then like, you know, get back to real life, and he's in like the New York Times talking about like being a countertenor, and I'm like, I got to work with him.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone was great, but he was definitely like a standout star.
Oh, for sure.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Next piece you'd like to learn?
For cello, I would like to learn the fourth Bach suite. For cello and piano, I would like to play Suite Italian,
Oh.
Stravinsky.
That's a beautiful piece too.
And for orchestra, I'd love to play any Shostakovich symphony. Now.
Ooh.
Right now.
So you haven't played one ever?
Oh, sorry. To learn? No. I'd like to learn one that isn't 1, 5, 7, or 10.
Fair enough.
You can cut that part out.
Okay.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
I'm sure you miss orchestra too. Well, I don't know. Maybe you guys are doing stuff. Oh, we'll get to that. I'm sorry. I jumped the gun. All right. Well, you made it through. You survived the Spitfire questions.
Thank you.
Could you tell me about how you got into the music field? How did you find the cello, and when was that decision to actually pursue it professionally? And talk us through your journey until where you are today.
Sure. So my parents have always been music enthusiasts. I can tell people in my family like listening to music. There aren't musicians in my family, but my parents went to the symphony. They'd bring me there. We'd go to their kids' concerts. I have two older brothers. One of them started on piano. The other started on violin. And when When I was 4, I wanted to play violin because my older brother Kajo was playing violin. I quit it after a week, didn't like it, switched to cello because I saw Yo-Yo Ma on television playing on Sesame Street. The same story like everyone in our generation tells, but that is why I chose it. I chose it also because he was sitting and I was just so happy to not practice standing.
That was one of my reasons
I tell everyone
too.
I started violin when I was 4.
I was like,
but I started
I'm
cello when I
sitting
was
down.
5.
I'm sorry.
Exactly. Yeah, you know, millennials. Yeah. So cello was always something that we did, and it was always something I did with my brothers. They both were in klezmer band, and I was in orchestra and band. I picked up clarinet when I was in 3rd grade and continued that through high school as well. We went to music camp, Blue Lake, Interlochen, the big Michigan ones. I started to have people tell me, you have potential, you have talent, you know, when you go to state and solo ensemble kind of stuff. And I remember thinking like, okay, but that's not what I should do. I went to a competitive college prep high school, so becoming a musician was always kind of like, that's just not something that many people from this high school end up doing. So it was always a hobby, or a lot of my friends, it was doing something to get into Harvard or insert your favorite college. So in the middle of high school, I really started to get serious because I was taking lessons with college professors and looking at double degree programs because I knew I wanted to do something else too. So I ended up applying to schools that had double degree or double major programs, and I ended up at Oberlin. And I started off as a pre-med major, and I told everyone I was going to become a doctor, and I didn't think I was good enough to pursue cello. So
Can I ask you why you thought that you weren't good enough?
So I didn't apply to the big schools. I mean, Oberlin's a big school, but like I didn't think I was good enough for like Juilliard or Curtis. I didn't even know what Curtis was in high school. You know, I knew I was good. I was in like the good youth orchestras and stuff, but you know, there were always a few cellists who were like much better, or like people studying with college professors since they were in middle school, especially people who had musician parents. Their parents knew what path to put them through. And you know, I'd come home and be like, Mom, we have to do this. And she'd be like, do we? Like, you're a good player. But it was kind of that hesitation and not having that support system at home. Like they supported me playing, but they didn't know. They were worried. They were like, well, you know, they didn't say you can't major in music, but they said that seems really hard. And, you know, even my private teacher in high school, she was like, you can go study music, but I just want you to know it's really hard. So I had a lot of people saying, you're really great, but it's hard. And I'm coming from a competitive high school where they're telling you can do whatever you want. Just use your brain. So
Okay.
Does that
that
make
answers
sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't want to say I come from a family that doesn't support people pursuing the arts, but both my parents are doctors.
Yeah. Well, then that makes even more sense why you were going down the pre-med route, is because that was a familiar route.
Yeah, I also had these interests that it's not like I wanted to do pre-med because my parents told me to. Like I was interested in medicine. I shadowed a gynecologist in high school. Like who does that? Like but I was interested in it. Yeah. So I was interested in people and how bodies work and making the world better and stuff. So I was definitely interested in it, but there was a feeling like I can't just do music. So. But I mean, honestly, I chose colleges. Like I chose schools where I wanted to be the worst cello there. Not bad, but I chose Oberlin because I knew I wasn't going to be the top cellist there. Like I could have gone to a less competitive school, but I wanted to be pushed. So when I got to Oberlin, I was not the best cellist there. And it did, you know, hit me a little bit like, oh, I'm not going to make it. Look, I'm so bad.
I see.
So I kind of set myself up for that.
Yeah, I mean, you just wanted to put yourself as the small fish in a big pond so that you had a lot more room to grow idea rather than being a big fish and not growing as much, maybe.
Except Oberlin is such a small and supportive school that I eventually did become a big fish in a small town.
Well, you know, but that's the whole point, though, throughout 4 years or 5 years, you said, right? So
yeah. So I started pre-med and I was going to get a degree in biology or something. By my 3rd year, I was in organic chemistry, which is like the major weed out class for pre-med and anyone. And I was sitting in class and the professor hands us back a pop quiz. And I knew I'd do badly on the quiz, but he posted the range on the board. You know, it's like, here's the range. Someone got 33%, someone got like 63%, everyone failed, whatever. But he looked at me and he was just like, yeah. And I had the lowest score in the class. And he was just like, come talk to me. And I was like, I hate this. I don't want to do anything. I just want to go practice. So I dropped organic chemistry, changed my major to neuroscience because I figured out that I'd already done a lot of the 101 science classes and I wanted to take more psychology classes, and neuroscience was really fascinating to me. So I changed that major, which meant I didn't have to take organic chemistry. And I decided then that I want to be a cellist. All I wanted to do was practice. I would text my parents in the middle of chem class and be like, I just want to go practice. I felt bad, but I also felt so enlightened. And that's when I started doing more extra chamber concerts, extra concerto concerts, really paying attention to my lessons. I told my teacher, like, I don't want to be a doctor anymore. I want to be a a cellist. And that kind of changed the whole framework of my time at Oberlin. So that happened. And then Oberlin, I graduated after 5 years. I did get 2 degrees, 2 bachelors, one in neuroscience, one in cello performance.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
It was worth it. I love talking about brain stuff and I still am very interested in it. But I did do some lab research my junior year in college and realized that all I wanted to do was go and practice. So I was working in this lab doing cancer biology research, and I was like, this is so important. This is so exciting. It was a really great program. But I'd go and work from like 9 to 5, and lunch was from 12 to 1. And I was at Vanderbilt, and I was like, I asked the music building if I could use the practice rooms, and I'd go during lunch. Because that's how, like, I was just so excited to practice.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not like that anymore, but I mean, I'm still excited to practice, but I'm not going to run during a 1-hour lunch break and go practice.
Right,
like,
exactly, yeah.
So I'm a little bit more planning these days.
Yeah.
You know, it showed me that I don't really want to do this. And then I went to grad school for cello. And then I finished grad school for cello and I applied to New World and I got lucky.
Okay.
And that's where I am now. I'm in my 3rd year at New World.
Yeah. Okay. Wait, I have a couple follow-up questions. Just for my clarification, you said you were at Vanderbilt, but that was just for the cancer research thing. It wasn't that you actually were a student there, right? That was just for research.
It was just an 8-week, it was called a summer science academy. It was like, you know, they have these things where undergrads can apply to work in someone's lab and basically just be like an unpaid intern.
Yes, that was
in
what
my
that
case,
was.
it was a paid intern. But
Okay.
I lived at Vanderbilt one summer.
Got
Yes.
it. So you went to New England Conservatory for your master's. Was that a big transition from doing a double major at Oberlin? Like shifting gears to be 100% total music versus having that outside perspective of being in another degree?
You know, it's interesting because, like, I don't want to say I have imposter syndrome still, but I kind of consider my life was about music and other things. And then in college, it became music. And I feel like I'm still, even as I'm at New World, I'm still learning how to be fully immersed in music without running to the library to study for a science test. And so I'm still learning. Like, it's only been 5 or 6 years that I've been away from that world. So even when I moved to Boston, I was just so like itching to still be in academia. So I would still go to like, I would look up, you know, like academic seminars, and I went to a seminar at like Harvard for PTSD or something. So I started to explore academic stuff in Boston just for fun. And I started to explore things that I hadn't had the time to do in Oberlin, like sociology, psychology, race studies, culture studies, that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was a big transition. I ended up taking a semester off after my first semester at NEC, New England's Conservatory, just because I was overwhelmed and like I wasn't sure if I wanted to do music. And Oberlin's a small town. It was 8,000 people when I was there. And you go to Boston, which is a medium-sized town. I'd never been that far away from, you know, home. And New England Conservatory was a very different vibe because Oberlin's very competitive. But NEC is like even more, they have a lot of big names and they have this beautiful hall, and Boston Symphony Orchestra is right there. And there's just definitely higher expectations. And it was also just a transition telling people, oh, I go to NEC, because people kind of hear that and recognize it. And when I'd say I go to Oberlin, they'd be like, oh yeah, where's that?
Oh, really?
So,
oh, okay. I guess
some people. I mean, not a lot of.
Okay.
Well, at least, you know, even non-musician people, if I say I went to New England Conservatory, they'll be like, oh, is that Berkeley? And I'll be like, no, but it's down the street from
Close.
Berkeley.
Yeah. Just walk a little farther.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It's funny because, you know, a lot of people think of music as being the side gig, right? Or like the hobby. But then actually for you, you inversed that. And it was more about academia being this heightened interest in it, and that you wanted to, for your own enjoyment, learn about these subjects. Whereas for a lot of people, that's just their job. So it's kind of an interesting flip situation.
That's something that I also explored at Oberlin when I thought I was going to be a science major. And, you know, when I realized I wanted to be a music major, that's when I started to explore music academically, sort of, in that I would actively try to go to non-classical music concerts. And I was like, oh, I kind of like jazz. Oh, I kind of like bluegrass. And there was a part of me that realized, like, okay, if I immerse myself in music, I need to go all in and really try to understand all types of music.
Well, yeah, and your story reminds me a lot of what Francesco McNeely went through, which is a previous guest on the podcast. Her episode, I believe, is called Soul Sisters of the Dark and Twisty. And she talks about her journey through Princeton and then switching to music as well. And I mean, you were in music, you're doing a dual degree, but she was talking about how she felt imposter syndrome, but in a different realm. It still reminds me of sort of what you're saying in this idea that musicians are not smart or not interested in other topics outside of music. You know, I just wanted to reiterate this potential misconception of musicians being only versed in one subject subject. And otherwise, outside of that, they don't know anything.
Yeah, I really appreciate that because that's like kind of the theme of your podcast. And that is something that I always have to battle with people who aren't musicians. And they say, like, what do you do for fun? Or, people are surprised when I have a neuroscience degree, but it's becoming super common for people to, a lot of these young adults going into college right now. We did a panel this summer at New World, and a lot of them were asking, what was it like to do dual degree? I'm thinking about doing double major. I have a cousin she's doing like triple major, quadruple minor. It's becoming very popular for that generation to do that. And I'm glad that I was at Oberlin because that is one school where you can be in the conservatory and you can take intro to neuro and be in the conservatory. I did have a little bit of that stereotype about musicians when I got to music school because I wasn't really around that many people who were going to music school. And then I arrived and I'm like, oh, they've just been practicing their whole life. They went to Metamount, they did all this. And then, I had friends, I was like, oh, what's up? And they're like, oh, I'm taking intro to like American politics 101. And, I was proven wrong. But at the same time, I had people also assuming the same thing about me, like, oh, you're only doing a science degree because your parents are making you, or you're only doing music. Like, you're not really serious about music because you're doing a neuro degree. I got both sides, basically.
Yeah.
We were just having a session with, I don't know if you heard of the book Burnout.
Mm-mm.
It came out recently. It's the Nagoski sisters, Emily and Amelia. And they're talking about burnout specific to women. And Amelia came and talked to us about burnout at New World. And she was talking about how it's so hard to admit that you might be tired of practicing and performing because people associate musicians with art and we're doing what we love and it's close to our heart. And if you're doing a wedding gig and you don't think that what you're doing is fulfilling, then what's wrong with you? And that's the same thing. People think, oh, you're a musician, you're doing what you love. There's nothing, you don't need anything else. And it's like, no.
Nuh-uh.
You need a lot more. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
It's just like, if you're an artist, you have to love doing the art, even if it's the art that's paying your bills.
Right.
And it's like, no, you don't always have to love it.
Right.
You can quit it if you don't like it, but.
Thank you. That's a great point. What I'm trying to say is like one influences the other. So like we all have to be inspired in some way. And a lot of people look to art as a source of inspiration or some form of creativity. But we as musicians and artists have to find inspiration outside of that. And yeah, we find that in all sorts of subjects and stuff. So to be sort of labeled as, oh, if you're not just studying music, you're not serious. Or if you're dabbling in some other outside subject, like, oh, they're not going to make it in the music world or whatever. Like that kind of talk is not really true because everything informs everything you are as a person and as an artist.
No, I totally agree.
So what was your decision to go into New World? That program is an amazing program. It's Michael Tilson Thomas's pre-professional
baby.
It's not a baby.
Pre-professional orchestra training program for the leaders of tomorrow.
That is the tagline.
Kind of yep. We say it. He brought this idea and now it's this, and it's amazing where it came from.
Right. So. No, absolutely. And if people don't know, Michael Tilson Thomas is one of the leading American conductors of basically our generation and the generation. I mean, he's just retired from the San Francisco Symphony, and that's where his home was for the past many years. The New World Symphony has produced so many amazing musicians and current professional orchestral musicians, because again, it is kind of a feeder school in that way. I know all of that's appealing to some people, but my question is, was it those reasons as well that it was appealing, or was there something else that you were looking for?
New World has always been on my mind since Tom Hadley, the admissions director, visited Oberlin probably my sophomore or junior year, and he just made it sound so fun, because at that point I was just like, orchestra, I want to be an orchestra musician. I'd go see the Cleveland Orchestra and I'd be like, I want to do that. And it's always been kind of on my mind. I applied during my undergrad and I thought, oh no, what if I get in? Do I want to go? Do I not want to go to grad school? I didn't get in, so it was fine. But it's always something I've been curious about, New World. And people, all the New World people come in and you're like, oh, how is it? And, oh, it's a blast. We play all the time. And I finished grad school in December. And so I had a weird period of time where I was kind of looking for jobs, trying to settle into Boston, and then also kind of freaking out and thinking maybe I should apply to more school, or maybe I should try to find a fellowship program. So I have some kind of stability as far as like living expenses and having direction, because I'd been in school for 7 or 8 years, so I needed that drive. I needed to have a schedule. And when I got into New World, like I just right away, you're going. I asked my friends and family, like, you have to go, no doubt, because I'm just so excited about it. But I think a big thing is just playing in an orchestra at this level with these facilities and playing a full program every single week. I can't get that in
Yeah.
Boston gigging. I can, but it's much more sporadic, and just a basic thing like that. And then also just having it's like a school environment, but it's a work environment, but you still have this support system. So you'll be in a practice room and it's like school. You can grab someone and have them listen to you play, but at the same time, it's work and we do get paid. So there's that stability part.
Yeah.
It's stability and support, and it's an adventure, honestly. You get to play so much new music and meet all these awesome conductors, and it's the same level of programming and guest artisting as playing in like the Boston Symphony Orchestra, except they don't have an audition for a cello right now. So New World is the next best thing.
Sure.
And it's something that you don't want to do. You do something like this after grad school. If you don't want to stop school and you don't really want to get a DMA or something, and it's like, oh, New World's here. It fit my feeling, and I'm still recovering from the imposter feeling, so I'm still trying to really immerse myself in music and learn as much as I can when I'm in this mental state of wanting to absorb it all.
Yeah,
because I could tell that freelancing life for me, I probably would lose some of my drive. I wasn't quite prepared for that kind of life, but I feel like after New World I might be slightly more prepared.
Yeah, that's where New World is such a wonderful haven for a lot of musicians, transitioning away from school, but yet not quite, sure exactly what direction you want to go in the workforce. And there's so many resources that they do provide for musicians there. So it is a really great, comfortable, structural safety net, all the things that you're saying. So what is the New World Symphony doing now in light of the pandemic?
So we went totally virtual last March, and then we didn't have any performances. We added more seminars and guest lecture kind of things, and then more sectional activities where we would play for each other. And then this fall, we had a sort of virtual hybrid where some of us we weren't required to be in Florida. So there were about 20 of us here. I never left Florida, so I've been here since March. I haven't gone anywhere. 20 to 30 of us have been around. And so they scheduled some chamber music concerts, socially distanced.
Oh, cool. So you've been doing...
And then continued having some seminars. And then once a month, we have a coach come, just like we do normally. We have a coach come usually once a month for every instrument group. And then you can have lessons with them. And then you usually have, a cello class, studio class with them. So we're still doing that, but online. And now we have brought all the fellows back to Miami. Everyone's here. It's still hybrid virtual, except now most of the fellows will be playing in the chamber music concerts. And we're trying to even do pieces with up to 25 players.
Oh, wow.
So no full orchestra yet.
Right. Everything's spaced out, masked, as much as we can be socially distanced as possible on stage. All the good things like that. Yeah.
Yep. They're providing weekly testing. We got the oral swab, thank goodness. And our stage actually can collapse. So we have even more space to spread out.
Oh, nice.
And the air conditioning is so high tech in our building. They even did a test to make sure that the air is filtering through correctly. So they're definitely being very careful. You can't enter the building without a negative COVID test.
Great. And I hope that everything stays that way as we go through, this next wave. But hopefully, again, like maybe we can get all the vaccines out and get inoculated as soon as possible.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of the elderly in Florida are getting vaccinated.
Oh, good. Excellent. Is there any upcoming projects that you might have?
Yeah. So back in March, a former fellow came up with this program where we would gather in the lounge of our apartments and play chamber music. And now it's called Live from Our Living Room. And I'm on the committee that helps organize it. And I have been playing a lot on those. And they're on Facebook and YouTube. We have a few coming up this spring, but so many people signed up that I wasn't able to sign up. So I'm going to try and sneak in my own little recital before the end of the year. I just played a concert called an Inside the Music, which is kind of a lecture recital series that New World does. And my focus was talking about music that makes you think of a different place or a different time period. The title of it was called That Sounds Like ... So my purpose was to talk about music appropriation and what does fusing different music genres do, specifically to classical music. So I played a bunch of classical chamber music, but then talked about, augmented seconds and pentatonic scales and the occasional racial stereotyping that happens in music, and then shared it.
That
so
sounds
it was really
like fun, though.
That's still online, but it already happened. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And you can find all that stuff on the New World website, right?
Yeah, the New World website or New World Symphony on Facebook and on YouTube, New World Symphony. They've been posting most of our recitals on YouTube as well. nws.edu.
Awesome. Are you ready to take a break?
Sure.
Okay. We'll be right back. Welcome welcome back from the break. So before the break, I was telling Chava that I went skiing actually right before our recording, and I've just started getting to cross-country skiing, which has been a lot of fun. And, of course, Chava's in Miami, so we were talking about the different weathers going on. Like right now outside, it's 30 degrees or something like that. And yeah, and you're like giving me this face of like, what? But yeah, it's like you're saying in Miami, it's like 70, but humid. You're like right next to the beach. So I
would
know.
love to walk into a winter wonderland right now.
Well, and I had a lot of fun skiing earlier today, but I also it would be so nice to just sit in a little chair on the beach and just have a book or something. Anyway, you wanted to talk about mindfulness and escapism. I mean, how relevant to the pandemic? Is there something that you discovered for yourself during this time? Or what do you mean by mindfulness and escapism?
So I chose those two words because at the beginning of the pandemic, and obviously still now, we have so much news updates and social media is a way to connect with other people. But I was finding myself glued to my phone. I mean, the first few weeks of the pandemic, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and just look at my phone and read the news, and I wouldn't be able to turn it off,
Yeah.
And so I was thinking of ways to kind of escape. And one of those ways was finding things I can do where I can turn off my phone or turn off my TV for an hour or two, or maybe 20 minutes, whatever, and still be able to live as a human.
Yeah.
Because it was so hard to get myself away from that at first. And I'm just so grateful for finding ways to deal with it. So one of the ways was just, at first it was TV. But then I was still antsy when I was watching TV. So I'd have my phone next to me and, I'd be watching an episode, but I'd also be reading the news. And I was like, okay, how can I make this better? So I picked up embroidery.
Oh,
I don't know how this happened. So my sister-in-law and I, we both happened to just order start your own embroidery kits from Etsy at the exact same time.
Oh, wow.
Even though we didn't talk to each other about it.
Whoa.
We found out we both started doing embroidery around the same time because it's been so, everyone's into their crafts and stuff, but I love doing embroidery because it's so specific and you have to really focus to put the floss through the needle. And then also just the techniques. I didn't realize that there's different techniques that you have to focus on. And I kind of fell into this world of crafting, and it was a wonderful distraction because you can embroider a flower and at no point while you're embroidering the flower do you have to read the news.
Right.
So it just became this obsession. And, if you go on Etsy, there's thousands of embroidery kits and people who sell floss, and you can buy the design in a PDF and just copy it onto your fabric. So that was something I definitely picked up on and have not stopped doing.
Wow, that's really cool. I wouldn't have thought to do that, but it makes sense. I mean, as someone outside assuming, I would say like, oh, why wouldn't you just practice then? Like, wouldn't music be a really good outlet? But here's my side of it. I don't know how you were, but I put my cello to bed during the pandemic because I was like, I can't. And I was also in the midst of just doing so much work that I just really needed to sit the cello down. But at the same time, what's so great about embroidery is that you're using your hands. At least for me, I love using my hands to work and do something. I feel like I'm productive in that way. And
I just found myself fidgeting, and you're alone so much, especially when there's a lockdown and I'm in my apartment and my cat can only talk to me so much. So I turn on the radio or I turn on like Parks and Rec and I keep watching reruns just in the background, but then I'm fidgeting with my phone. I realized that a lot of it was just me having all this restless energy. You have to know that this was during summer in Miami. Everyone else was going outside and hanging out this summer during the pandemic. In Miami, the average temperature during hurricane season, summer, is like 90 and it feels like 100. So I was hiding inside with the blinds closed. So I had all this restless energy, and like you can exercise, but then after a while, the rest of your day, you want to do things. I didn't want to put away my cello. I didn't want to practice my cello, but I still wanted to play music. So I was setting up like chamber music reading sessions with people. My awesome friend Wesley here, Wesley from Rice. Yes, Wesley Ducote, shout out.
Hi,
So,
Wesley.
every time I asked him, do you want to play a Beethoven sonata? And he's like, yep. And I'm like, oh, do you want to play this? And he's like, yep. And he never said no. So I was like, yes. Because when I'm not feeling musically motivated, I want to play with other people.
yeah.
So I did a lot of that, but you can only do that for so long before you want to do something else. So embroidery was a way to turn off my brain and just focus on something. And if you don't focus, you poke yourself. And it doesn't feel good.
No.
And also, like, if I poke my finger and I can't play cello, it was like an extra, I really
Incentive.
had to shut myself down.
Yeah, interesting. Wow. When I would never have thought any of those specific things to know about. I'd never embroidered.
Well, if you
personally.
try to embroider and watch the news or watch a very intense TV show, you will poke yourself, and it's not very fun.
No.
So I picked up embroidery, and then I also picked up Korean dramas. I had started watching them a few months before the pandemic, but it was more like in August of last year. My sister-in-law was like, let's try a K-drama because she loves them and they watch them all the time. And I was like, oh, whatever. And I got obsessed. And then I started watching more and it became a thing during the pandemic now. I sit with Hannah and Kofi, so that's my sister-in-law and my brother, in Boston. And we watch K-dramas and we keep the phone on the whole time. So it's basically like we're in the same room, even though we haven't seen each other for more than a year now. It helps me center myself. Like if I'm talking with other people on the phone, then I'm not staring at my phone checking the news all the time because they're there. So it kind of motivated me to be more specific about when I want to be with other people. And if you want to talk to an old friend, you know, I'll be on my phone talking to a friend and I would be checking the news or I'd be going on BuzzFeed. This is like earlier in the pandemic. I could never stop. So now it's like that mindfulness of like, I'm going to call my friend John and I'm going to go outside and sit on the beach or do something where I'm just talking to the friend. But Korean dramas, what really helps is the language barrier. I do not speak Korean. So you have to focus on the closed captioning. You cannot just ignore it. I mean, you can kind of ignore it, but then you have to ask who you're watching with what just happened. Because K-dramas are known for being dramatic and having a lot of plot twists and family tree confusion and all kinds of stuff. So paying attention to the translation is so important that you can't really do much else when you watch if you want to actually know what's going on. So that was something that I found this newfound interest. But the reason I use the word escapism is because just like embroidery where I can lose myself and just stare at a flower I've been threading at for a few hours, if I'm watching a Korean drama, it's not a language I speak and it's not a culture I grew up learning about. I'm learning because I'm researching everything that I don't understand later. Because when you watch translated, they sometimes will translate and then they'll say a word in Korean and then explain like all the details behind that word. Or they'll say, oh, they're referencing a king and this is what the king did. Or they're referencing this pop artist who did this thing. And then you can look it up and do it. You can look it up and see what it's all about, but it goes by so fast. It depends on who's translating the drama for you. Like Netflix doesn't really have good translations.
Maybe that's why I didn't know about it.
Like there's a phrase in Korean, I'm not going to say it right, but it sounds like fighting. They say like whiting, like it's kind of like good luck or do well. And I was so confused because I was like, it sounds like fighting. And then I looked up the history behind it and realized it has a lot to do with hearing Americans say fighting and like the occupation and the history of the country. And so as you can see, it became this nerding out thing where I had to like look up all this stuff because it's like someone wakes up and they're 28 and they've never heard a Beethoven symphony before and they become obsessed and then they have to listen to everything by Beethoven. That's kind of, but you know, I try to be careful because I don't want to watch 100 hours of a TV show from a country and not try to understand what is going on culturally, you know? Because you can easily watch a soap opera from any country and just make fun of it, but it's good to try and understand. Another thing is Korean dramas have really good soundtracks. So that was another draw for me. You know, lots of classical music fusion and overlap and pop music, K-pop.
I've never watched any Korean dramas. I have to admit, I know so many people are probably like, I know I should go down the rabbit hole. I know. But for me, at least,
it's not for everyone.
Well, I mean, if I can watch Dawson's Creek or Riverdale or something, like, I mean, don't make fun. No, I'm just kidding.
Honestly, I think Dawson's Creek was a show I watched when I didn't realize what K-dramas are, but I think the reason I liked that show was also because I liked soap operas in general. Now I see there's some Dawson Creek things happening in some of the shows I watch.
Well, sure. But I'm saying like a similar formula or something along those lines, right? But just for at least me, which ones did you watch or which ones would you recommend to like start off with?
There's one called W, like just the letter W.
Okay.
It was the first one that made me fall in love with K-dramas. And it is a comic book, real life, alternative universe fantasy drama. So I won't say much more than that. It's also a thriller and a romance, of course. So there's a lot of factors going into it, but that one really drew me in. Another one that I really liked that is on Netflix is Mr. Sunshine. It was probably one of the most popular ones the year it came out. And that one ties in American, Japanese, and Korean histories together in that the main character this isn't very realistic, but he left Korea in about 1900, went to America, became an American soldier, and then went back to Korea when the Americans went there during the Japanese occupation.
Oh, I see.
And gets involved in some Japanese and Korean drama between different classes and different cultures. There's romance, there's war history, and there's Japanese occupation. There's a lot going on. It's a very beautifully made drama, and it's in the 1900s, so everyone's outfits are amazing. That's another good one.
Yeah.
Another one on Netflix that people can watch is called Hospital Playlist. It was pretty popular this past year. It's kind of taking on the Grey's Anatomy-esque group style of there are a bunch of doctors working at a hospital and they're friends, but they went to college together, but they start a band.
Oh, yeah.
So that was cool.
Oh
They
my
start a
God.
band. I mean, I'm definitely more into the K-dramas where you're just crying all the time and it's about dramatic family history, but Hospital Playlist was really cute.
Okay.
And it goes into the medical stuff too. Like we were watching, we were like, oh, this is actually getting, they're talking about like a kidney transplant and they might actually kind of show it. And you're like, whoa, wait.
Oh no.
That's something I noticed about Korean medical dramas, unlike American medical dramas. A lot of times they'll have the translation, but then they'll also have something in Korean on the side of the screen that wasn't translated, which is describing what the medical procedure is. So they'll say, oh, they need sutures. And then in the bottom, it will say suture, and then it will say something in Korean that is saying what a suture is. And I thought that was really cool because I watched all of ER when I was a kid, but there was never something in the corner that said like what a stint is or something.
Yeah,
like,
right.
So I thought that was really cool. That's just like a little thing that's different between the American and the Korean television culture.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say it's like the furthest culture from my own, but it's definitely escapism because everything I see, I'm like, what's that food? What's that? And it's like, I grew up in a pretty diverse area, but like, I don't actually know what's in the food and like everything that people are eating, or there's popular slang and stuff. So
it's a great way of transporting yourself to a foreign country, or at least as you're saying, in the culture of that by watching it when we can't travel during the pandemic.
Well, the interesting thing about like, I got interested in Korean dramas, and then of course I have Instagram, so I like to post reactions to things. If there was a dramatic scene from a K-drama that I really liked, or if there's a soundtrack that I think is really beautiful to listen to, I would post it on my stories and people would react and be like, what is this? And I'd be like, it's a Korean drama. And they're like, oh, are you Korean? I'm like, no. But then I had a friend reach out from college, my friend Dimitri. We were in a studio together at Oberlin, and he's from Korea, and he recently moved back to start grad school. And he was just like, oh, well, I've been to this place in the show. You should come and I'll show you. And it's like, I'm reconnecting with people who I haven't really talked to for a while just because I'm watching these shows.
Yeah.
But it's cute when you don't realize you have similar interests with people. I mean, it's the same with like reality TV. If you post a reality TV meme, people I haven't talked to since high school will start connecting with me. That's part of the whole pandemic thing. You're alone and you want to connect with more people. So how do you do that? In my case, it's posting memes and posting Korean drama soundtracks, and people react. And they're like, I watched a classic drama from 2002, and Korean dramas in the 2000s were over the top. It's called Stairway to Heaven.
I've heard of this one.
I'm sure you've heard of it. But it's like, even if you describe the plot to people, it's like, oh, step siblings who fall in love, but also forbidden love, but also parents dying, but also people dying, but also cancer, but also an amusement park mall, and everyone's rich, and oh wait, someone loses their hearing or something. It just like, it keeps going, and you're just like, what is going on? So I posted a lot about that one, and like a lot of people contacted me and said, oh, this is such a classic. I watched it in 2002 when I was 10, and I'm like, oh, that's so cute. So it definitely has helped me connect to people. And it's not just Koreans and Korean Americans that I went to school with. It's also just random people who are obsessed with them. So it's been really interesting to see who comes out of the woods and is like, I love that show too.
Yeah. So here's a question. I'm going to be pointing out a slight contradiction, which is that the reason why you're doing these activities is to get away from your phone. But then yet again, it's also helping you connect and reach out to people through social media. So how do you balance the two?
No, you're making a really good point, which is the complicated part. I guess the balance of the two is that I try to separate when I'm doing those things. So for instance, I'll make an effort to, if I'm going to watch a TV show, I'll put my phone on airplane mode, or I'll be watching it with my siblings, and I'll try not to do anything on the phone while I'm watching it. But then I might make a mental note. Oh, that scene was really cute. I want to take a picture of it. Or, oh my gosh, what is this song? This song is so beautiful. And I'll during the show, I'll be like, this song is so beautiful. I have to look it up. And I might look it up on my phone and save the tab, but I usually have to like research it before I share it. I deleted the Instagram app from my phone, but if I want to share something with people, I have to actively go and type it in and log in on a computer. So that definitely changes the whole aspect of having notifications on your phone all the time. Mm-hmm. But it definitely is a contradiction. I definitely am all about that. I'm trying not to be on Instagram all the time. So I'm watching reality TV and K-dramas, but then because of that, I add myself to like, there's all kinds of Reddit rabbit holes you can go on about TV and stars and stuff. It's changed my feed to go with the contradiction. I'm still on social media. I'm still, I still care about people liking my posts, and I still care about connecting with others. But when you go to my feeds, everything's different. You can tell it's a little bit more, I don't want to say it's wholesome, but it's less sad and more joyful. As I like to say to people, most of what I go on Instagram now is for people's pets and K-drama updates.
Yeah.
And if you go to my Explore page, it is mostly cute animals, delicious food, and Lee Jung-suk, who's my celebrity crush.
I think that could be worse.
But it changes who you want to follow, and like you unfollow people or you unfollow things that you realize were making you unhappy. And I definitely noticed with the pandemic, I'm starting to follow more of the self-love Instagram pages where they just post a reminder, like, you need to drink water today. You need to make sure you embrace yourself today. And it's like, I thought that was really cheesy, but I'd much rather see that than news updates.
Yeah.
I say escapism because I don't go on Instagram to know about the news. I go on the news to read about the news, you know?
Yes.
So, but you're right. It is contradictory. Absolutely.
Sounds like you've really found that kind of balance for yourself.
I also have just been going outside a lot.
I mean, hey, that helps, right? I mean, walking around and getting a little bit of physical exercise, just moving your body is.
Well, you said you go skiing. Not everyone where you live wants to even go outside, but even when it's -3 degrees outside, if you go outside for like 10 minutes, it makes such a big difference. I moved to Miami and everyone's like, you should go to the beach every day. And I kind of rolled my eyes at them, but I was like, wait, actually, if I go to the beach every day, it's not going to hurt me.
Right.
It actually feels great, but it's hard to get yourself to leave the apartment. It's hard to get yourself to leave the house when your phone is just calling to you. I turn off all my notifications. I don't have notifications anymore. So like, I'm done.
Basically, it sounds like you've noticed the negativity that can come from being on your phone too much, or how apps are notifying you and constantly grabbing your attention, and that you've found for yourself a way of escaping that and also finding that mindfulness in balancing your daily life and being a human. And I recently watched, and I'm sure a lot of people have, but for those who haven't watched this documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma, I do recommend it. It might scare you a little bit because you do get an inside look at to what the apps are really trying to do, which is get your attention. And they configure with all the cookies and all the things, your homepage to be exactly what they assume your profile is based on what you click on and what you purchase, and all the data that is stored on you becomes kind of a profile of who you are and whatever. And it does get a little bit dark in the documentary, but I also think it's a really important thing for people to watch, just to at least get a sense of control over what you do with your phone. Is there anything else that you wanted to share?
Well, I just wanted to plug that I find a lot of peace from water. And it doesn't matter what kind of water. It can be an artificial lake. It can be a pond. It can be the Atlantic Ocean. I'm super grateful to be on Miami Beach during a pandemic, but I really think it's good to notice what brings you peace and slows your breath down. That's a big thing for me. Like watching the waves reminds me that, oh yeah, I'm a living, breathing thing. It sounds silly, but it's especially during the pandemic, you have to remember that you're a living, breathing thing.
Yes.
So I've really found if you feel like you need to be outside, don't question it. It's our human nature. And wearing a mask sucks, but I think it makes it totally worth it. Just to see other people when you're alone in your place. Nothing beats actually seeing people. If you can see people at a distance, or just getting fresh air and looking at the water. And, you know, I see the jellyfish and I'm like, they're having a great time. So
they don't know what COVID is.
Too, you know, No, they don't at all. So don't doubt that you feel trapped inside. Try to find ways to go outside, even if it's freezing. Just a 2-minute walk to take out the trash might affect you in ways you didn't think.
Yeah.
So
can I ask you 2 final questions? What, in your opinion, is the most common misconception of classical music and the classical music world?
The biggest one that I battle almost every time I play is that classical music is made for a certain person and a certain class. Classical music is not just for white people, and people don't even realize, if you look at most of the orchestras in the United States, they're not all white either. And elitism, factoring that in and understanding, because it is partly true that classical music is an elite field, but realistically, if you look at these composers and who they were composing for, and like composing for the church, or string quartets being a way for people to play together at parties, there's so many variations of what we mean by classical music. And so just to understand it, it's much more complicated than just Beethoven and Shostakovich. There were thousands of composers, and there's a lot of composers that we still are learning about who weren't included in the canon, especially composers of color that are finally coming out of the framework. And it's like, oh, there's a lot more to classical music than we know.
Yeah.
I think the learning curve is huge and it is taking more time than people want it to, but it's 2021. This country is still a fairly new country. If you compare it to like any other country out there, the United States is young. And so we're still learning from our mistakes. And I think classical music is catching up. We're like a few cars down the train. The learning curve is steep. That's what I got to say. There's going to be resistance, and I can understand the resistance because you can't deny that there's these great composers and we shouldn't eliminate them from the canon. But, you know, for me to come to New World, and it was like the first time I played a piece by a Nigerian composer, and I was just like, oh, what? African classical music? So, you know, just like something as basic as that, it's just like you don't think about it, but that's kind of what we have to relearn, is including certain people that have been kind of avoided. And like with most things, not everyone who was avoided in the canon was good. There's a wide range of artists out there who didn't get their chance because of their race or their gender, but we still have to give them the chance that they didn't get. So even if you don't think someone's that great of a composer, they never got to be on anything. So we just have to give them a chance.
Yeah. I'll move on to the next question because, of course, I'm opening a can of worms, and this will be something that is a conversation that needs to continue anyway. After all the impact that COVID has done to classical music, what do you think is something positive that will enhance and carry on in our profession?
I've learned through my own performances and watching other people perform, people still want live music. People still want live art. And that is something that we need to hold on to and recognize it, but also listening to the audience and their needs. And one of their biggest needs is live performance. So I do believe that COVID has definitely reminded people that live art and music is valuable and fun.
Yeah. I also think, though, that it's also a good reminder for musicians that we miss our audiences. All of these video recordings that we do, that's what we can do now. But the moment that we can play for a live audience is going to just feel so amazing, you know, and just able to connect in a live space together, again, is the community side of what we are trying to do as performers and collaborators.
Absolutely.
Anyway, are there any platforms or websites for our listeners to learn more about you and any upcoming projects?
I do not have a personal platform, but if you go to nws.edu and look up the fellows, you can find information about me. I am also on Facebook, and New World Symphony is also on Facebook. Otherwise, look out for concerts. New World will post about them.
All right. And if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, go ahead and press that subscribe button and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. The reviews and ratings help this podcast be more visible to others, and it's a free way to support this podcast. Another free way is to tell your friends and family about it, and you can always become part of the Haydn Behind the Music Stand family by donating to our Patreon page at patreon.com/Haydn Music Stand. Don't forget, there's a Spotify playlist available that contains all the pieces we've discussed on the podcast. It's a pretty big list, so don't be discouraged when you look at the playlist. You know, you can just scope through and pick one piece a day or something and just get acquainted with it, because it's all really great music, and the link is always in the description of each episode. Follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all at Haydn Music Stand. Chava, thank you so much for being on the show. It's so good to see you again after so many years. It's so good to see that you're doing so well as well.
Yes, nice to reunite, Patty.
Yeah.
I'm glad we are both now cat moms.
Yes, I was about to say. And please give Elba some pets for me.
Absolutely.
And thanks for listening. Say bye, Sushi. If anyone hasn't sat down and
Oh, hi, Sushi.
Oh, simple, sweet, short. What's this saying? Short and simple.
It's okay.
Short and sweet. Sweet and simple.
Short and sweet.
Short and sweet? No simple? There's no simple in it.
Short and sweet. It's short and sweet. Okay. I think it's short and sweet. Maybe it's a regional thing, though.
No, I think you're right. Short and sweet. Simple. I don't know why I keep wanting to say simple. Okay, whatever.